Welcome to the Digital Forester Podcast, where we talk to foresters about how they are using digital technologies in their day-to-day forestry work. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Digital Forester Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Brendan Moore, who's a project manager at the Lyme Timber Company. Brendan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Kevin. How about you?
Good. Very well, very well. So where are we reaching you from? Nowadays, we just really don't know where people are, but maybe let us know where you're calling into the show from.
Yeah, so I'm calling in from Tunbridge, Vermont at a home office. My headquarters is in Hanover, New Hampshire. That's Lyme Timber's corporate office is in Hanover. And then we've got satellite offices spread all over the eastern half of the country.
Very cool. Very cool. So before we dig into maybe Lyme and getting to know more about the organization, maybe share with me how you got into forestry, because again, you've got a project manager title, but I know we've spoken in the past. You're technical as well, even though you have the PM title. So maybe to start us off, share that story of how you got into forestry. Was there a connection with family, or it was school, or what was that journey like for you?
Yeah, all of the above, really. So I grew up in Vermont. I grew up on used to be a dairy farm, and then we switched to beef cattle. But there's a woodlot, pretty good sized woodlot, a couple hundred acres out back, and from a pretty young age, started working out there with the trees. My father was always working out in the woods, and he still does part time. And so got interested in trees, got interested in forestry. Went through a high school program that actually had a forestry elective, and so I went through all that, and they did a really good job of exposing the students to small consulting forestry that's really common in the area. So I was excited in it in high school, and then actually attended University of Maine, got my bachelor's in forest management, and been working in the forestry business ever since.
No kidding. That's amazing. I always find it fascinating when there's sometimes a spark in high school, this little thing that kind of exposes you to something, and it just kind of blossoms from there. So out of curiosity, are you still in touch with maybe your teacher from high school? Like, do they know it's like, I actually went and carried on with this, or that's too far back?
That's on my bucket list. I haven't.
Yeah,
I should get back into the classroom there, because they used to have a lot of guest speakers that would come on this cycle and rotate and talk to the students. So it's a good reminder. Thanks, and I'll try to get that on the schedule.
Well, hopefully I didn't volunteer you by accident. Your teacher's actually listening and going like, hey, there we go. Like, Brendan's on board.
If Mr. Hires, if you're still listening, I think you may have retired. Hopefully you're sitting on a beach somewhere. But if you're not, if you're in the classroom and you want me to come back, Kevin has volunteered my time.
There you go. That's awesome. So very cool. You're up in the Vermont area, US Northeast. So again, us Canadians often joke like, very like-minded, even though separated by an administrative boundary, country boundary line there per se. But was Lyme where you started? Or maybe tell us about that journey on the industrial side, or the commercial side.
No. So I started. I worked when I was in college. I spent 2 summers cruising timber for a little company called International Paper. They used to own a bit of land. I was working in Maine. I was working in New York. I was working in northern New Hampshire. We were out there doing 10-factor prism plots every single day for as many days as we could before school started. And so I did that for a couple of years. When I graduated college, I got a job with a small consulting forestry firm in Vermont, and we're doing typical small woodlot management for family landowners, anywhere from 25 acres to 2,000 acres, working with logging contractors and the local mills, and then we started picking up some larger management projects for the Lyme Timber Company. And so we were a small consulting forestry shop. There's actually, it's like 2 employees for a while, myself and the owner. And so I worked with Lyme as a consultant, did that for a number of years. Actually kind of got out of the the forestry business as a full-time thing and got into sugaring. And so I was running a big kind of industrial scale sugaring operation in Vermont. And I did that for, it was about 7 years that I worked in that business. And I always kept forestry going as a side thing. And I started getting more and more into GIS. Initially, to support my forestry clients. But then once I got into the sugaring business, I was like, we were trying to manage, we've got a 30,000 tap operation. Wow. And miles and miles and miles of pipeline and tubing and all this infrastructure out in the woods. And we were working, we'd have a lot of seasonal workers. And so we were always trying to transfer information like about this huge network of pipes that we have in the woods. And so I really take it like a real deep dive into GIS to be able to like map out all this stuff and symbolize it and categorize it and really have like a real database that we could use for the sugaring operation.
Yeah.
But that career ended, and I was fortunate enough to get hired directly by Lyme Timber 4 years ago. And so I've always kind of been working with them and helping them out as a consultant over the years. But now I'm actually an employee of the company. And so my role, continues to evolve. But
yeah. So if you're in the sugaring business there with, sugar maple, so does that mean you have a lifetime supply of maple syrup going forward in perpetuity?
Not anymore. I've actually I think for the first time in my life had to purchase some syrup last year.
And I'm sure you're like, the grade wasn't as good as what you might have.
No. I know which producers to buy from. So
okay. Well, we'll have to exchange notes after this call, so I know when I'm down in your neck of the woods.
There's a lot of good syrup made in Vermont. It's pretty simple. Yeah. Just like the beer, the craft beer scene's great in Vermont. So it's pretty easy to find good beer and good syrup.
It is very cool. So maybe introduce us to the Lyme Timber Company for our listeners who may not be familiar, or I won't say a different beast, but maybe slightly a different beast in terms of who you are and what you do. But maybe give us the lay of the land of the organization where it's doing work, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. So Lyme was founded in 1976. It's a private timberland investment organization. And so we're doing private equity funds investing in timberland and also associated businesses. We've invested in a couple different log sorting yards. We've actually got 2 company-owned logging crews that we've started, and we've invested in 2 sawmills in Pennsylvania recently in the last couple of years. But we're focused in the forestry spectrum. We've got about 1.5 million acres that we're managing right now. Most of it's on the East Coast, from New York, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Tennessee, Florida, and then a lot of land in the lake states that we've picked up. And so we've got, the corporate headquarters is in New Hampshire, and then we've got field offices with a local management team for each one of our portfolios. And so we're trying to build up, we've got businesses, we've got local foresters, we've got a local manager, we've got an office, we've got admin staff, a lot of the login infrastructure and associated businesses as it kind of goes with each of these portfolios.
Right. So thinking of technology and given that, I don't know what the right way of putting it, but like different business units maybe, or different people, and that local component, has the organization had to invest heavily in technology to I don't know what the right word, unify or maybe standardize or normalize the different operating units, or what can you share on that front?
Well, yeah, we're not, we don't really have any overarching objective to standardize across our portfolios, because they're really, really diverse. I mean, we've got southern pine, in Florida, we've got sugar maple up in Michigan, and then we've got black cherry and oak and hickory and different things in Appalachia. And like the logging contractors are different. The whole forest management system is different. So we allow a lot of flexibility, but Yeah, so we've had to invest a lot in technology, and part of it is just to support our operations. So we're buying these properties from all of the normal players, that are dealing in large pieces of timberland, and um, sometimes when we do an acquisition, it comes with a lot of data, and the data is really relevant, well organized, and other times we're buying the land and it doesn't come with much of anything. So we've got to start from scratch, and the things happen quickly, right? We can pick up 100 or 150,000 acres in relatively short time period, and put together a management team, and we keep the logging contractors going, and so the technology has like helped get people up to speed quickly, and learn about these new properties.
Right, for sure. Now you mentioned in your younger days you're doing a lot of cruising, and so maybe reflecting back on the younger days where you're probably, well, maybe I won't speak for you, but for myself, more agile, probably 30 pounds lighter, and just more nimble on my feet. Any patterns you've seen in terms of the technology used then? Was it pencil and paper tally sheets, to today? What are you doing? Or maybe I guess the first question is, what trends have you seen from your younger days to now in terms of timber cruising? And then maybe share with our listeners like what technologies you're using now to do some of that cruising and appraisal work.
Yeah. So we were it was it was a bit old school. We had compasses and we had hip chains, back in the day, and so that's to get into our plot locations. We weren't even carrying GPS units. Not to make myself sound like a dinosaur, but they were around. We just, they weren't that good, and nobody, we just didn't really think about using them. So that was the cruise spec. So we're out there with compasses, and there's actually, we could do a pretty good job. And part of the reason was because we had really, really good stand maps. IP at that time, they were doing this big management cruise, and they'd flown really good aerial photography, and they had the best interpreters go and update all their stand mapping. So like their stand typing was super accurate. They had all the roads and the streams, and so we had paper copies, right? But like if you paid attention to that paper map and you were good at navigating, it was almost as good as a GPS unit. And now fast forwarding to today, we've got tablets, we've got smartphones, we're using all of Esri's field applications. So we've got all that data, plus obviously everything's GPS enabled. So it takes a bit of the guesswork out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I know my daughter started doing orienteering, and then at one point she was like, what is this thing? I'm like, yeah, that's called a compass, honey. And she's like, what do I do with it? I'm like, this is why you're doing orienteering, so you can read a map and go to school, right?
Yeah.
And figure out how to get yourself unlost. So thinking on that side of the technology side, maybe tell me more about, like you mentioned, using the Esri apps there. So I'm assuming this is like collector field maps or survey 1, 2, 3. So thinking of different geographies where you have business, different foresters, and forestry by default, some would argue, or say it's like it's local, like depending where you are, things are different. Do you find that the adoption of that technology has gone smoothly without any hiccups, or do you find that as Brendan, as a project manager, you need to do a little bit more what's the right word, hand holding, guiding, nurturing the foresters to embrace this technology? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's been a little different. Some of the foresters, they've got a little easier than others. Some of the land bases are easier to manage, maybe better stocking, better access, less operability constraints. I find that the folks that have the most challenging forest to manage are the ones that adopt the technology fastest.
Okay, interesting.
So West Virginia, we've got a piece of land there in Southwest West Virginia, and it's super steep, really rocky. The ground's so steep, some of it's hard to walk on. You got to be careful, and so we did a lidar project down there, and built some applications, and got all this data is available to all the foresters, and they they adopted it really easily. Like they're ready. They want things to make their jobs easier. And
Right.
I was able to, just help them understand how all of this data actually makes their job easier, as opposed to just one more step that we're asking them to do.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So you mentioned the word lidar, so you flew some airborne lidar. Maybe share, because I suspect maybe there's some listeners who, again, lidar is the hot topic, right? As we think about areas where we don't have a good description of the terrain, it's a no-brainer. Fly lidar, get a detailed terrain, and again, unless there's like some change in the landscape, like earthquake or like some major event, the topography is not really going to change in our lifetime per se, so you have a nice base. But we also know it can be costly, and so it sounds like you're flying imagery where it's appropriate, and then lidar where it's appropriate or needed. But maybe, was that an easy sell into the organization in terms of, was it just like, it's so steep here in West Virginia, it's like it's a no-brainer, like we don't really have a choice, we just got to fly it? Or did you run into some challenges and hurdles, and if so, what were some of those, and how could our listeners benefit in terms of them thinking about initiating similar types of mapping projects in their organization?
Yeah, the first one was a bit of a challenge. I mean, I got interested in it when I was actually working as a consultant, and I tried selling it to clients, and their answer was always, "No way, it's way too expensive. This is crazy. Why, how can we spend this much money per acre to get this data we're not even sure about?" And I don't think I've become any more convincing, but I think the data itself has improved, right? The density, the point density that we can collect now is way better than 5 years, 10 years, 15 years ago when I started looking at this stuff. And the cost has come down per acre. And those two things, have aligned. And we tried a project. We first did it in Tennessee. That was probably 3 or 4 years ago. And it worked well. I mean, the foresters latched onto it. The thing that it's, when you get high enough point densities and you've got, the individual tree crown mapping, or even just a really good resolution canopy height model, you can see there's so much variability, within a stand. And we've got all these stand polygons, and people are used to managing at stand level. And but especially in the mountainous terrain, the site specific variation is huge. I mean, we've got, the cove sites, and you've got super tall, valuable trees in the coves, and then you've got these different ridges and different heights and different age classes. And that stuff is hard. Takes a lot of time to figure out if you're just walking through the woods trying to piece it together. And when you can see it all in an image on your computer before you even go to the woods, you improve your field work. Basically, you have a real good guess of what's out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
You still go to the woods, you still got to verify it. There's a lot of things that haven't changed, but it just gives you a leg up.
Yeah. So do you think, Lyme being a TIMO there, do you think in general, I know you can't cast a broad brush across all TIMOs, but do you think we're in this era where some of these things that maybe the foresters and yourself like fought to get funded, do you think we're past that point where this just becomes an everyday toolkit in a forester's, toolbox? It's like, yeah, for our properties, we need to know what's going on, and whether you fly once or, every 5 years, 10 years, whatever that program mandate. Do you think the space is at that point where it's mature enough that it's kind of a no-brainer?
It feels like it. Yeah. I mean, we've probably done 700,000 acres of LiDAR in the last couple of years, and I don't see any reason why we're going to stop now. I mean, we're just working our way through property by property, taking the lowest hanging fruit to start with. But yeah, it seems like such a important part. I mean, labor is hard to find. Labor is expensive. It's like we gotta appreciate the foresters that we do have, and make them as efficient as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we can't, maybe there's a point in time where you can say, all right, let's just hire 3 extra foresters and get the same work done. Well, that's hard to do these days.
Yeah,
you
for
gotta,
sure. No.
You got to make do with the people that you have.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so for our viewers on the YouTube side, like Brendan's not an old dude, he's like a young guy rocking a ball cap here, and he's a cool dude. And so thinking of that on the labor front, what are you seeing? Is there like we hear about labor talent shortage across all sectors, really, especially in the technology space. We feel it all the time. But what are you seeing on that side of things? Like again, being in in Vermont and then tied back, even though you haven't visited your high school, but your alma mater and stuff like that. Are you seeing that replenishment of foresters, young foresters going through the program? There's excitement in being a forester, or do you, or is it still kind of flat and it's kind of like it's like forester's job? I don't really want to do this. What are you seeing from your neck of the woods?
It's a bit of a mix. I don't, we're having a hard time, finding enough young people to come in. So we are doing some out in the Lake States. They've got a really good program that they've been running for a number of years, but it's basically a apprenticeship. And we're trying to expand that and just do, there's a lot of good forestry schools out there still, but I think we need, more industry to step up, to do more of the education, get people, excited about it, just give them a job, give them a summer job and pay them something so they can afford to live and get them excited about forestry.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
Absolutely. I wish there was more.
For sure. Now, thinking of spaceborne mapping, I guess I know it sounds like you guys fly multispectral imagery and stuff like that on aircraft for probably the species component. But thinking of spaceborne, does Lyme dabble with any of that? Because there's a whole another sector, like Earth observation, applying AI, machine learning, deep learning to these remotely sensed images from space to, do seedling counts or health assessments. Is Lyme in that space yet, or not yet, or no plans, or what are your thoughts about the whole EO space?
I mean, we've been using Planet for a number of years, with all their Planet scope stuff. It's got pretty good frequency to it. And we've started with some change detection software, again, in Appalachia. And part of that is to keep up with all the coal mining activity. So we've got, we're the surface owner, but the minerals all owned by these other folks, and they're out there. Coal prices in that region are really, really high right now. So there's a lot of activity and quite a bit of land conversion. And so we are doing, satellite-based change detection. And that's a project we just started. That's actually, we tend to outsource a lot of the stuff. I know enough about it to be dangerous, but I don't tend to do the the analysis and write the algorithms myself. But we'll find, the industry experts that we can hire to help us out with these projects.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Sometimes the hardest challenge is defining what the problem is, and trees there at one point, trees no longer there. Just show me the polygon. I often joke, just point line polygons. It boils down to that. Now I'm just curious, like with the coal side. So within your, I guess maybe GIS systems, like again, Esri sounds like you guys don't run enterprise, do you? You're running ArcGIS Online, mostly cloud stuff. So when you mentioned the coal side, like, is there any cool data exchange interoperability, or is this really like we're doing change detection analyses because we don't know what those, I don't want to say cowboys, but those other stakeholders that's the right term, other stakeholders are doing on the land base, and we need to figure that out? Is there plans, different ways of achieving, data interoperability or data sharing, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we haven't done a lot of data sharing. They tend to operate in a bit of a silo. They'll send us a PDF map and all of their, the mining permit boundaries. But we feel like it's in our interest to take the initiative to keep track of where they're working, and they have every right. They have, the legal right to go in and do all of these activities. But we still have obligations. We're FSC certified, and we just need to internally keep track of how the forest is changing.
Right.
And
right.
And we're changing. We change it every day. We're out there harvesting timber, and we're building roads and landings, and so it's not just monitoring third-party activity; it's monitoring ourselves. For sure. Now I know you guys also, at one time we spoke, you had some
harvesting machines running in one of the geographies, and is that kind of standardized across different regions, or is it really specific? And maybe tell me more about how that technology is being used in your business.
Yeah, so that was our first foray into a company logging crew was in West Virginia, and it's actually kind of a atypical setup for the East Coast at least. So we're doing tethered logging. We've got a cable yarder for extracting all the wood. Right now we've got like an 8-person crew working down there, maybe 9 or 10 pieces of equipment, and that's, yeah, I've been leading the management of that project for a couple of years, and that's, it ties into all of the lidar stuff that we've done. This, as I said, a steep slope, so we're tethered logging, and there's actually a limit. You can cut in a very, very steep hillside with a tethered harvester, but there's still a limit, right? I mean, and we've had to find that limit. Turns out for us down there with the rockiness, it's about 105% slope is the upper threshold, and so we've been able to build these raster maps that are showing areas less than 105% and areas greater than 105%. and it's a nice cutoff, and it helps you just visualize, helps the forester say, okay, here's a whole section over here that we're not going to be able to operate. And not only do we have the maps in the office, on desktop, but we've got we're putting them in. So this is all John Deere harvesting equipment. It's got the Timbermatic software, and so we're actually able to create a base map image and import it into the harvester, so that operator, he's seeing it in real time as he's going up and down the hill. He can see all of the slope data, he can see the contours, he can see the streams, stream buffers, everything is in there. So it's just helping him, see further ahead and anticipate what's coming.
Yeah, I'm still kind of a gobsmacked or an awe. 105% slope. I'm like, so these are, well, I might say some brave. I'm not sure I would want to be in a harvester tethered on a 105% slope. I'm like, yeah. Hopefully it's tethered well, obviously, but that might be beyond my scariness factor type of thing. So
no, they've been getting used to it. I mean, we don't operate that every day. That's really that's the extreme end of it, so they're on 70 to 90% is their typical slope that they're working there.
Yeah, and I think for those people who want to see some of that, I think you guys had a social media video at one point kind of showing. I'm not sure if that was for West Virginia. I assume it was for West Virginia. Given the terrain.
That's West Virginia. Yeah, so that logging company is called Mountaineer Mechanized. And so if you go on YouTube and look for Mountaineer Mechanized, you can find there's a couple of drone videos on there.
Yeah, very cool. So lots here. Like we got the harvesting, the harvesters, the telematics we're touching on. You're using a lot of the Esri technology, more of the ArcGIS Online, so not so much the enterprise side of things. So thinking about technology, it's like, is there something that has unfolded with the technology that you're using that surprised you, maybe in terms of maybe the type of technology, or maybe the adoption, or maybe the resistance? Is there something there that's just kind of that, or has it been really a flawless, smooth journey in terms of how Lyme Timber has adopted technology to realize its business outcomes?
I'm gonna say it's been flawless. I mean, there's certainly been some speed bumps in there. Yeah. A simple one, I guess, is just disk capacity, right? So we do the stuff and we're flying, anywhere from 10 to 30 point per meter lidar, and you create some huge files, and then we make these giant rasters, and then we ask people to put them onto their phones, take them out into the field, and they're like, hey, well, guess what? I've got a bunch of pictures, a bunch of music on my phone, and I can't fit this thing, right? And so we end up we've had to replace our hardware a little bit. Now we're getting smarter about it and buying things with giant hard drive capacities to start with.
For sure.
Because it just multiplies. The other thing is trying, so we've done a lot with Survey 123 as far as field data collection, and it's easy to build, relatively easy to build nice slick forms. You have a lot of questions and dependencies and nice, things that are very logical, and it works really nice. But it is still a challenge sometimes just getting people in the field to actually initiate that process and complete the survey. It's people like to keep things in their head, and they know they went out in the woods and they saw XYZ, and they understand, and it's like we still have this reporting need, and we're trying to gather as much information and kind of organize it in a sensible database. But that our interest of storing and tracking the data doesn't necessarily align with the forester's day-to-day interest.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. So maybe thinking of, like, if you had a crystal ball in front of you and you're looking at the things, like, again, you're in that project management role, so you have a portfolio, I assume, of projects that you're probably juggling or maybe firefighting, depending on which day, type of thing. But if you had a crystal ball and you kind of look forward, maybe like 3 years out, do you think the landscape, in terms of the technology you're using, is largely going to stay the same, or are there certain things you're kind of, because again, I know you're a technical guy, it's like, and watching things unfold across the tech space, but is there some sets of technology that you're not really using right now, but you're keeping an eye on, hoping that it might solve some opportunity or problems, I guess? Well, problems in quotation, problems become opportunities, yada yada yada. But is there certain technology you're just keeping your eye on and just patiently waiting for it to mature or become more affordable?
Well, we really haven't done much with species delineation and species mapping, and maybe there is, maybe the technology is mature enough right now, but we're working in, some of our properties are really, really diverse. In Appalachia and Pennsylvania and New York and even the lake states, there's a lot of species diversity, and we haven't really, we've done really detailed lidar projects where we're mapping individual tree crowns and getting the heights, and the height data is incredible, but we haven't added a species component into it. And so that's something that we're looking at, and hopefully that'll come along in the next couple of years. That'd be great.
For sure. And then thinking of your operations, is like pixel-based species sufficient, or you really need that individual tree and that species tied to that? Is some EO product, I know a couple folks are doing / trying to do that now. What are your thoughts on that?
I think pixel-based would be fine, as long as it's a fine enough image. It's,
yeah,
and I guess the other thing I'd like to see, that we've dabbled in a little bit, but we haven't really initiated a full project, is so we fly this lidar, you get great elevation models, and you get slope and everything, but there's a lot of other operational layers that we use, and one of those is roads, trails, all of our infrastructure. We spend millions of dollars every year building and maintaining roads on our forest, which I'm sure a lot of listeners are in the same boat. Roads are really expensive, and they're really, really critical to our management. But to have some sort of process where all the roads could be remapped or updated, and calculate the slope of the roads and the width of the roads, similar, there's processes for building, obviously, the canopy height models, and a bunch of different forest metrics that we can pull out of it, but we haven't done a lot yet with those other data layers that are really important to us.
For sure. Well, I know on one side there's probably, in the global listenership, I know there's probably vendors that are chomping at the bit, going like, oh, I can solve that problem for you, Brendan. And I suspect there's AI experts going like, I can solve that problem for you as well. So if you get peppered by a bunch of vendors after the release of this podcast, you'll know where it came from. But are there anything else, like thinking maybe 10 years out, watching the landscape for technology, is there something that you're really like excited about that could be a game changer? And so this is obviously taking us a decade out, like it's pretty far out, who knows what's going to happen. But again, as someone who's watching the tech space, it's like, is there something on the radar for you? And no, that wasn't a leading question of saying radar, but
Yeah, I guess what I'm hoping to see is the stuff, all this remote sensing just continues to mature, come down in cost enough so that we can afford to do a more frequent, return on it, right? Because our forest, like, we can collect the best data today, we can fly any of our properties, and the cost is reasonable. And then as soon as we're done with that acquisition, the plane lands, well, guess what? Our forest starts changing and trees grow. Some of our trees grow really, really fast. And they also get cut down every day, just about. And so to have something that could be, high frequency, to generate a canopy height model, quarterly, monthly. I don't know. Like, let's try to, like, we can calculate growth, height growth on stands from doing a cyclical remeasurement. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, very, very neat. Yeah, for sure. And I remember back in my day in school, and probably if you did a remote sensing course, there's always pick one of the three, right? The spatial resolution, the temporal resolution, and the spectral resolution. But then, maybe we're entering that age where it's like you can have it all, and
Mhm.
you be Willy Wonka at the chocolate factory or whatever, like get everything that you actually want. So we'll see where we go from there. So thinking of the time we have together left, like thinking of organizations in a similar boat trying to get into digital, and some of your experiences, are there maybe one or two pro tips you would give that listener who's like, because I suspect when you talk about roads, we got to build roads, someone's probably listening going like, hell yeah. It's like, we can relate to what Brendan's saying. And then I'm sure there's vendors that say going like, I can solve your problem. But as we think about this space, it's sometimes hard to take that first step. And once you build that momentum, we've heard other speakers talk about champions and executive sponsors, that whole change management side of things. In your experience, is there one or two pro tips that you could share with our listeners in terms of how to, maybe leapfrog some of those speed bumps, that the common ones there?
Yeah, I mean, for me, this, what worked on my end is just spending time with the people who are going to be using the data. I mean, there's certain, back end analysis that we're doing in the corporate office from it, but really it's about the field foresters, and spend time with them and understand their jobs, like spend an entire day with them and see what they're doing. And I'm always just looking for things that's in their normal workflow. We're not trying to change their jobs. We're just trying to, like, give them little tools and workflows that makes their job easier and better. So I'd say, start from the ground up and look for things that you can provide, and then go to the technology and ask the technology, well, how can we get it to do this thing that we want, as opposed
Sure.
to, well, here's this technology and how can we make it fit onto our land base. I like to work from the bottom up.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I'm going to shift gears just for a couple minutes here, and being Lyme being a timber investment management organization, and then recently, with the focus, or maybe the hyper focus on climate, and even with climate tech, a lot of investment dollars going in different organizations. Some have raised, in the $50 million range, Series A's and whatnot. Uh, as a TMO, it's like, how are you seeing climate, your investors, that ESG mandate maybe come into how you're doing your business, and does that tie to technology? I know you've talked about FSC, and then you have reporting requirements, so you need the technology to, collect the data, amalgamate it, smash it together to spit out a report or some component. But what can you share in your thoughts on climate and ESG, and how that's influencing how Lyme's going about its business in the short term and maybe medium term?
Yeah, so it's huge. I mean, everybody is paying attention to it these days. We've internally spent a lot of time working on developing our ESG goals, and one of those is about fuel efficiency. And so we're burning, across our operations, it's a huge amount of diesel fuel every year from all of our logging contractors and our truckers. So there's a lot of things we're working on, but just to focus in on one of them for the sake of time, we've got, we're trying to build, a model where we can optimize our harvesting opportunities. And there's certain places on the property that are more or less fuel efficient to harvest than others. And the technology, even just on the tracking end, right? So with the John Deere logging equipment that we have, and we're able to track fuel consumption, and we can get down and track it on like a daily basis if we want. We know exactly how many gallons each machine burned on each day, and then we can compare it to the site conditions. So we're trying to get to a place where we're just more informed. We can take like a data-driven approach to our harvesting activities, right? I mean, our foresters are very talented, they're very experienced, and everybody, does their best to make smart decisions. But now, as we're able to quantify more things and have more metrics about each stand, about the volume, about the slope, the location, transportation distance, how far is it, to the sawmill, and we're just trying to tie all that stuff together. And we have our goal is to reduce our fuel consumption by 15% from our harvesting and hauling activities. And so we're still in the baseline documentation phase, and it's I feel like it's a pretty lofty goal. We'll see how we do.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that, because it invokes so many things, right? You need the geospatial data, as you're talking about. You need the system to do the basic management, and then the optimization algorithms to run it, and then the analytics then to pull it together. And I'm sure at some point somebody wants a report or a dashboard that then can be presented to other groups. So very interesting on that front. And then out of curiosity, because you have that ESG component, do you think bringing in new technology or solutions will be an easier sell to the organization, or do you think it's just same as when you guys started doing the lidar mapping? It's just you have the business case, the ROI back to business 101 in terms of why would Lyme do this? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to change a whole lot. I mean, we've always been open to new ideas and try to be really innovative with our management, really smart about it. It does help focus us on certain things, right? It's easy to get scattered, and we can sit there on the whiteboard and we come up with 30 different ideas, and we all think these are the 30 best ideas out there, but there's only a certain number we can accomplish within a given year. And so for us, our ESG process has kind of focused on the things that we all feel are the most important to deal with right now.
Right.
And so we're looking at other things. I mean, there's no electric logging equipment out there, or hybrid logging equipment out there that's really being used, but there is on the trucking end, right? And so people are starting to do alternative fuel log trucks, and you can have electric trucks, you can have hydrogen, and we are starting to look at some of that stuff and trying to figure out how we can adopt the technology. Really, it's our contractors. We don't own any log trucks ourselves, and don't have any interest in doing that, but we want to try to be the facilitator that'll help somebody take that leap and try a more fuel efficient vehicle.
Yeah, it's amazing. Even on the trucking side, we see some truck platooning as well, to the discussion earlier about labor shortages and how you can be more efficient. It's going to be really, really interesting there in the next decade to see how things unfold. So kind of an oddball question, and as we're looking to wind down here, oddball question. If you were to look back and talk to young Brendan as forester coming out of high school, is there something you would share with that young Brendan and saying, watch out for this, or maybe don't discount this, or is there something you would share with your younger self going back in time? This is my Back to the Future question, or no, I guess Back to the Future, Back to the Past. Oh, whatever the saying is. But is there something that you would share?
Pay more attention to math class, I guess.
Oh, that's a good one. That might be universal. Universal to everybody. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. So, hey, as we wind down, if folks want to follow up with you, this is great. It's awesome talking with you because, just to your point of saying, often it's important to just talk with your field foresters, understand, spend a day with them in the bush or woods. Again, depending which country you live in,
Sure.
different jargon per se, as I've been told. But spending that time, and then so on this podcast, listening to you, it's like you're sharing some of those problems and challenges, but really those are opportunities maybe for our listenership that are playing, young people looking at creating new companies, or even more established ones that are saying, hey, I can bring some horsepower, if you will, to help out on this. But for folks who want to follow up with you and maybe poke your brain a little bit, that never sounds right, does it? Poke your brain. But anyhow, who want to follow up with you and talk more, what's the best way for them to reach you? Like, I told you at the start, I was going to tease you, like, it's not LinkedIn, because I could not find a LinkedIn
Can't find me.
profile for you on that. But what's the best way for people to reach you?
Well, you won't find me on Facebook either, but you can go to limetimber.com. You can contact me through that.
Awesome.
That's probably the best way.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to say, you're not going to find me on LinkedIn, you're not going to find me on Facebook, but you'll find me on TikTok. I'm saying that in a joking way. So there you go, folks. If you want to reach out to Brendan, best way is just the website. You can Google Lyme Timber Company. So Brendan, thanks very much for taking the time to speak with me. I know we were trying to do this for a couple of weeks, and you got sick and had some health issues. So obviously you're doing a lot better. But thanks for carving out the time, for sharing your story. I think this is really cool, being able to talk to a TMO and getting that view. I'm not sure, I'll leave it to the listeners, whether there's common threads, from a forestry company, an integrated forest products company, a TMO or a REIT, in terms of some of the challenges and problems they're facing, and whether they're really all the same, just cast in different lenses. But thanks so much for sharing your time. Any parting thoughts on your end to our listeners? I always give the last word to our guests.
I just to say, this is a technology podcast, but it's definitely, like, it still comes down to the people. And one experience I've had is in employee retention. And I'm sure a lot of people are out there are thinking about employee retention, and wages are going up, and you're still, like everyone, you're concerned if someone's going to jump ship and go for that next job that's paying even more. But we've actually used this technology. We've heard it from some of our foresters that they feel appreciated, when we do these big projects, and when we invest a lot of money into their land, and we give them a really nice tablet with really nice imagery. That's all about the technology, but for them, it's a personal thing, and they appreciate that as an employee. Right, that we care about the property, we care about the work that they're doing, and it's just a real concrete thing for a lot of these people that are in the woods.
Yeah.
So don't forget about your people. That's
great final thoughts. No matter how much technology we adopt and embrace it's not going to replace those the relationships that we build between human beings in general. So awesome parting thoughts, final words. Brendan, thanks so much for joining us. Looking forward to chatting the next time, and all the best, and we'll talk soon.
Take care.